Hello. Today we are going to talk about Africa and my experience with that continent. My work in Africa started in 1992, and it was in relation to a global exchange project based in Colleferro near Rome, in Italy, in which we trained students from Africa for 2 years on developing their capacity to become civil society leaders. And then after that, I started to be involved in many countries within Africa, like in Ghana, like in Tanzania, in Zambia, in Nigeria, in South Africa, and Kenya. In this book, Tales of Love and Service, they are describing several of these experiences in Africa and as well in other parts of the world. And this was written by my friend John Gehring. And there is one chapter in the book that talks specifically about, actually 2 chapters. They're talking about in this book on our work in Uganda. In one chapter was related to a service project and also related to a project that I started in Uganda in 1999. There was a program in cooperation with the Office of the President of Uganda, Museveni, in order to set a rehabilitation programs for guerrilla fighters. They started in 1999. There are several newspaper articles that are describing that activities that they came out in that period of time. In 2000, we organized international service projects with the participation of youth from around the world, engaging as well some of the guerrillas. And this program for the rehabilitation of guerrillas was applied for a period of 3 years, in which we succeed to reintegrate 545 guerrilla fighters from the north of Uganda, from the Lira district. And in the time, the lady working with us, there was a personal assistant to the president. She sent me this letter from the Office of the President, in which is saying, symbol of the drum. So they gave me this, they donate this drum, a small drum, but in Uganda there is an incredible long-lasting tradition of drum players. They're fantastic. They're unique. So they're very famous because of their drums. So they sent me this letter in which they say, here in Uganda, the drum symbolizes a call. The honorable minister has given you this drum as a sign of a call you are making for the cultural peace in the world. Thank you, Apio Sara, personal assistant to the minister and to the president, vice president office. So these are, the sound is almost there because they gave me this in the year 2000. So it's quite old, you know. And so how was the work in Uganda within the rehabilitation program? It was quite amazing because at the time I was based in Luxembourg and I received a phone call from one of my advisors and contact from the United States, in which he said, oh, Massimo, I received a request to do a survey in Uganda to see a possible way for the resettlement of guerrillas fighters, that they are surrounding themselves step by step in north of Uganda. And they are going to provide a certain funding, you know, from the World Bank, but it was really a huge amount of money. too much, actually. So actually I refused because I felt it was not ethically correct to manage it with that type of approach. But I became very interested because at the time already I was engaged in Kenya. So on my next trip to Kenya, I also stopped in Uganda. I traveled to Uganda. And I went there to the capital in Kampala and tried to address the issues. So through specific circumstances of contacts within the Kampala city, I came in contact with Betty, the minister and assistant to the president, that was managing this situation with the rebel in north of Uganda. And so we start to talk about possibility of funding, funding strategy. But then I said, but I need to meet these people in order for me to understand how is the situation on the ground, on the root level, on the basis. And I said to her, but is it safe to travel there? Is the situation under control? And then she said, well, no problem. Everything's fine. We can go there in 2 days, we can organize, and we travel there. So we coordinated, and 2 days later in the morning, they came to the hotel to pick me up. And there were 3, they call it like this kind of big pickup type of SUV. There was the front pickup, there were 5 soldiers with machine guns. There was the car of the assistant of the president, and there was another car behind with other 5 soldiers with machine gun. We went in her car, and there was the driver, the co-driver, and 2 guys in the back. And this co-driver and the 2 guys in the back with machine gun. So I said to her, but you told me that the situation is very sure and secure, that there are no problem with all these machine guns. Say, oh, no, don't worry, everything is okay. So I was a little bit, concerned. But anyway, we traveled from Kampala to the north of the country, to Lira. It was a long trip. And when we arrived there, in the following day, the situation actually was okay. All these apparatus were just to protect her for security, for state securities. And so they organized the meeting, the first meeting, with the captain of the guerrillas and all his staff, and myself, my national representative from my organization, for which I was working at the time in Uganda, the minister, the general for the army, and 2 other advisors. And we met in this court, in a school court. There was like a kibbutz, looks like, like a pagoda almost. No wall, open, with a table. On the other side, there were the guerrillas representative. And on this side, there was our group. And the guerrilla, they were already articulating several things with an NGO from Norway connected to the Red Cross. So they were already relaxed, let's say. But, we discussed it for basically almost the whole day. With no result, nothing concrete came out. And the group from the guerrilla side was particular. There was a guy with a bee scarf crossing all his face. There was another guy without an arm. And you could see that they were people that went through a really hard time. And then what happened? There was a coffee break. And I was talking with the leader of the rebels. His name is Scipio Kello. He died now out of HIV, the so-called Siga in Brazil, AIDS. Several years later, he passed away because of that disease. And so we were talking together during the coffee break. And then in talking, we discovered that I and him, we were born on the same day, on the same month of the same year. So he was totally shocked. And somehow he changed, he clicked. And then he said, you are Scipio Kello in Europe, and I am Massimo Trombin in Africa. We are brothers. Now we can really talk. So I was a little bit, very surprised, because you never know how people are going to click, what makes people change their attitude. This particular situation in which he discovered we were born on the same day, the same month, or the same year, opened up his heart and his mind. So we resumed the talk, and finally we came down to an agreement. And from that situation, we start to build this rehabilitation training program for the rebels. So what we have done, we organized through a local college a program, an agriculture program, with experts from NEMA, that is one of the agencies working in the environmental program, agriculture program, through their director, Mr. Rutange, an expert in agriculture. And we start to do like a schooling type of program for them. And not only for them, but also for the wife, like widows of rebels. And we train them how to agriculture, be able to be reintegrated in society. Another NGO provide the funding to buy land for them, to build a house, to provide the seed and the tools through which also we gave a contribution. But mostly we invest our funds, for the teachers, for the location, to support the transportation of the group. Like, for example, we provide the funding for several number of years for them to go into the forest with motorcycle, outreach to other rebels that were hiding, to come out because there was an amnesty from the government, to come out and to join our program in order to be reintegrated into civil society. The great difficulties was for the people in the community to accept them back, because they did a lot of harms as a rebel. They killed people, they destroy properties, they create a lot of social unrest. So, especially one case in which they attack a police station, killing the policemen in a village, create a really big negative impact. So I convinced them to build a new police station and to restore the older police station as a volunteers. And I provide the materials for doing that. So because of that act, somehow the community was convinced that these people, they change, and they were able to and willing to be reintegrated in the society. So that has been one of a very intense experience in Uganda. And there was also another project previously in a different region of the country as well, in which we restore a medical center and a school. And in that project, what really moved me, we were there with about 40, 50 volunteers from around the world. There was a particular act every morning. I was sleeping in a tent in that location, and every morning when I was opening the zip of the tent, there was this young boy, maybe 5, 6 years old. Every single morning he was there waiting for me. And each morning he'd have a different fruit to offer me with a big smile. So that was my welcome every day on the project in Uganda. And we were working to restore this orphanage center that was run by another NGO, of which this boy was also part of it. In later time, he became one of the director of that center. So my message to you also in relation to Africa that I want to convey is the perception of Africa that is generally out there is not true. Usually the perception and the opinions, the idea is really connected to a stereotype opinion about Africa. Africa is a huge continent. People in Africa, they are very different. From east, west, from north, central, and south Africa, they are very different. They have different history. They have also incredible culture rooted with historical references. And Africa is a very rich continent. So it's a continent of great potentialities with great people, and the new generation of Africans are very different from the past generations. They came out of a colonial type of mentality. So I can see Africa as a bright future ahead. And I hope that many of these social unrest that are still taking place, like in these days in Ethiopia or in other parts of the continent, are going to be soon solved. And so peace can be really achieved in each location within the African continent. So thank you very much for today to listen to this testimony about Africa.